So welcome to today's tutorial on comparing functions. Tonight's homework is really tough, but it utilizes a lot of the things we've already done. So we did question number 1. So let's take a look at question number 2 from your homework. It says, Sammy and Lee recently joined LA Fitness. Their weight loss progress is shown below. So it says that Sammy weight in pounds is W, and the T is the time in weeks, and it's shown by the equation W equals 340 minus 1 5/10 T. Lee's weight loss is shown in the table below, and you can see that after 0 week he weighs 305 pounds, after 2 weeks he weighs 297, after 5 pounds 285, and after 6 weeks he weighs 281. And so we want to know who is losing weight faster and how much more faster. So in order to do that, we got to figure out how many pounds per week each one is losing. And that is pounds per week, so that is a unit rate. So let's take a look at Sammy. Well, first let's figure out the initial value, which in the equation W equals 340 is 340. So the initial value is 340, and that's going to indicate his weight when he first starts. Now the slope in the equation is going to be negative 1 5/10 T, because that is the slope, which is the unit rate, means he's losing 1 5/10 pounds per week. So the next thing we got to do is we're going to take a look at Lee. And Lee, his initial value is 305, because when X is 0, the weight is 305, and that's his starting weight. The slope is going to be the change in Y over the change in X, and we've done this with the table many times. We got to figure out the change in Y, which ends up being negative 8, negative 12, negative 4, which indicates he's losing weight. And the change in X is going to be positive 2, positive 3, and positive 1. And so we got to double check and make sure every corresponding change in Y and corresponding change in X equals the same thing, and they equal negative 4. So the slope for Lee is negative 4, so he's losing 4 pounds per week. So since Sammy's losing 1 1/2 pounds per week, Lee is losing 4 pounds per week. Who's losing weight faster? And so Lee is losing weight faster. Now how much more weight is he losing? Well, you need to subtract 4 minus 1 5/10. So Lee is losing 2 5/10 pounds per week faster. So now let's take a look at who weighed more at the beginning of the show. Originally this problem had to do with the biggest loser, but here at the beginning, who weighed more? Well, Sammy weighed 340 pounds. Lee weighed 305 pounds. So who weighed more at the beginning? Well, Sammy did. He weighed 340 pounds, while Lee weighed 305 pounds. And that's how you do question number 2 on tonight's homework. So let's take a look at question number 3. It says Mr. Lemus and Mr. Vermillion are both riding bicycles away from Whittier. Their distance D in miles from Whittier after H hours is described below. So for Mr. Lemus, we got the equation D equals 75H plus 30. For Mr. Vermillion, we got a table. After 0 hours, he is 40 miles away. After 3 hours, he's 205 miles away from Whittier. After 6 miles, he's 370 miles away from Whittier. So who is traveling faster in miles per hour, and how much faster? Very similar to question number 2. So we got to figure out in miles per hour. So that per hour is the unit rate. So that's going to be the slope. So let's figure out the slope for Mr. Lemus. Well, that's easy, because the equation in the form of Y equals mx plus b, m is your slope, and in this case 75 is your slope because it's next to the variable h. So while we're at it, let's figure out b, the initial value. In this case, the initial value for Mr. Lemus is 30, which indicates he is 30 miles away from Whittier. Let's take a look at Mr. V. The initial value is 40, and the slope is going to be the change in y over the change in x. And after dividing, you can see that there's a consistent change. And the change in y is going to be 165. The change in x is 3. And so when you divide 165 by 3, you end up with 55. And so the slope for Mr. Vermillion is 55, which is a unit rate of 55 miles per hour. So Mr. Lemus is traveling at 75 miles per hour. Mr. Vermillion at 55 miles per hour. So who is faster? Well, Mr. Lemus is faster. How much more faster? Well, it's 75 miles per hour minus 55. And so 55 minus 30 miles per hour is going to be 25 miles per hour faster. Now, let's take a look at question B, which is who is farther from Whittier initially. So you got to look at the y-intercept, which is the initial values. For Mr. Lemus, the initial value is 30. For Mr. Vermillion, the initial value is 40. And that indicates that Mr. Lemus was 30 miles away from Whittier, while Mr. Vermillion is 40 miles away from Whittier on his bicycle. And so who is farther away? Well, Mr. Vermillion. Because Mr. Vermillion is 40 miles away from Whittier initially, and Mr. Lemus is 30 miles away from Whittier initially. So that's how you do these problems. Some of them are more difficult, but this is the gist of it. There is one or two problems that are a little bit tough, but I'll make sure I go over it tomorrow with you guys and make sure you guys know how to do this, because this is on the benchmark. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.